I'm not gonna lie, I'm so nervous. Oh my God, I'm feeling so nervous. I have wanted to do this for such a long time. I believe I have had the idea of starting a podcast since 2018. And maybe I could give you guys a backstory. So I was sad. I was going through something, and I was feeling so sad, and I was feeling so lonely. And I remember finding this podcast that used to just share about like females and their experiences in life, dating, all of that. And it brought me so much comfort. And I wanted that for other people, but through my life experiences. So from then, I've held on to this idea that I would really like to share some of the things that I have been through, some of the things that I feel like have held me captive with emotions of, shame, fear. And I just wanted to come on here and like share my life experience. Basically, me trying to understand why I am the way I am. So, welcome to Unpack with Samantha Nyakoe.
For the longest time, it did feel like my sad was more sad than the usual sad. When it rained, it definitely poured. Consider this podcast a love letter from me to you. Let's unpack.
It's so weird like talking about your life story because I wanted to start with my name. My name is Samantha. As most of you know, I was born in Nairobi, Kenya. Yeah. I'm not really sure about the specifics because I don't have like memory of that. But I know I was born in Nairobi. I grew up in a place called Shaurimoyo. It's along Jogo Road. So it's basically near Buruburu, but it's not Buruburu. I feel like I'll explain why I mentioned Buruburu in this particular play, like sports. I grew up with my mom in Shaurimoyo, and it's basically in Eastlands. It was just a simple life. Like I remember, like we'd play till like late in the evening with my friends in the estate. Life was good. Life was good. Life was simple. I was very playful. And then I think it got to maybe like around class 3. And I remember there was so many things happening at home. And by so many things means I was a smart girl. My dad felt like the school that I was in was not really bringing me any sort of competition. And he wanted me to go and explore another school. So with those discussions going on, and I feel like I was in class 3, so I wanted to also experience living with my dad. And that is when I told my mom, you know what, I'm trying to go and live with my dad. It was then that I went to live with my dad. My dad lives, or rather like, we had like a home in Githurai 45, somewhere deep in Githurai 45, somewhere called Moihoko. It was actually quite a nice experience. I feel like I loved living there. It was basically like a village. Everyone knew each other. And there was some sort of community-based living going on, right? I remember going there and I was just like, oh my God, these people are living nice, because in Shaurimoyo, if you know how like Kambi, I don't know if you know what a Kambi is. A Kambi is like an estate, but basically like government-owned houses. I think that's what they're called. So they're very small. In that house, we used to live like me, my mom, my aunt, and my cousins. So we were like a group of females in one small space. That's what I felt like growing up. And now when I wanted to go to my dad, I was just like, oh my God, I want to try this new life. It felt like his life was interesting. He had a car. I wanted to go and see what his life was like. And I remember, I actually have memory of the first day I walked into like my dad's house. And I remember seeing my small sister. And I was like, interesting. They look alike. Can you imagine as a kid, you're just like, okay, who's that girl? So I remember meeting my sister for the first time. I don't know if that was the first time, but I think it was. I don't remember us getting introduced like this is my, like, I don't remember how the introduction went, but I went and lived with them from class 3. I went to a school that was nearby, an academy. It was a really, really nice school. I actually really appreciate the fact that I went to that school because it kind of changed my life. Like it was a really nice experience. And true to the fact that my dad said I was not getting any competition where I was. So I really did get like new competition and like some new energy and like, want to, like it was just a different experience, I think at some point, I don't know what class I was in, but I remember during a social studies class, during that class, they were teaching about like types of families. So, types of families, there's definitely the nuclear family, there's the extended family, there's the single parent family. I think I raised my hand so many times in that classroom. In that classroom, I raised my hand so many times in that classroom. So I remember asking, okay, hi. I think my social studies teacher then was called Teacher Lawrence. I don't know if I should mention like names of characters, but I feel like for some people, I'd really want to mention their names because they were very like impactful in some of the stories that I'm gonna say. But I remember my social studies teacher, I raised my hand and I asked him, so what you mean? I'm just like, so for example, me, I live with my dad, and my dad has another wife, and I have other sisters. But also, I also live with my mom, and with my mom, it's just me and my mom, and my aunt and my cousins. Now, I think that was me trying to challenge the teacher, and I'm just like, what does that mean? I remember asking that question, and I think he understood me. Like he, after the class, I think we had like a chat. But this conversation, I think about it. I've thought about it like later on, and I was just like, oh my god, as a kid, I was so confused. Like I was confused. Am I coming from a nuclear family? Because I can tell that my dad and like my sisters and the wife, that's a nuclear family. I can also tell that my mom and me, that's a single parent family. You get? And then I can also tell that now when I include my cousins and my aunts, and now everyone else, because also on my dad's side, there were also cousins living in the house. So I could tell, okay, now that's an extended family situation. But I just remember being very confused as a kid and wondering, where does that leave me? Like, where do I belong? So I think I've always asked questions, like for the very longest time, I've always asked questions about why are things happening the way they happen. Probably at the end of this podcast, you kind of are going to understand me better. I would love for someone who like kind of relates to that small girl and those many questions, and also like just having I think we call it a blended family dynamic. I would love to hear like some of these stories, hence why I want to share. I didn't ask any of these questions at home. I just remember they used just to be at the back of my head. I'm just like, this is a bit, a bit weird, a bit crazy. I think that in terms of like the blended family, everything was just, it was normal. Like I remember we used to have so much fun with my stepmom. And I remember even like books and like stories in Kiswahili Mufti would talk about like Mama Wakambo and how like mean stepmothers are. But then when I think about it, like she was never like mean to me. I was never, like punished for things that I didn't do. Like the typical stepmom stories, that was not there. But I remember feeling so different. Like just growing up, I always felt so different. And it would be in situations like I think I liked experiencing that side of life, like just living with my dad, because he's a very cultured man. And by cultured, I mean like he's always around family, like there's traditions. He was strong on traditions, like a typical Kisi man. Like I'm not even gonna lie, a typical Kisi man. So there would be traditions and like just I experienced so many lovely things that I would not have experienced in my life if I didn't go live with my dad. But in these scenarios, I remember family members would be like, oh, Uyo Nule, like, like translation for this is the other, this is the other one. At the back of my head, there was always that this is the other one, like mentality, analogy. So as a kid, I always knew I was different. Almost like a feeling of I don't belong. I'm here, but I don't know really if I belong here. There used to be those instances. I don't think my relatives knew like maybe how that made me feel, especially like just putting me in the spotlight and being like, oh, this is that other one. As a grown up, I've actually asked my mom about, like, how did you meet? Like I've asked all those stories. Maybe I come to understand, oh, that's what they meant. Maybe it's the story they knew about what happened now, between my mom and my dad. And then now there was me, and I'm that other kid. I think that brought such a a difference. Like I just felt indifferent from so many people, especially as a child, doing so many things. Or maybe I'd touch on like there were good things that happened while I grew up, but there were also the bad, and I feel like there were also the ugly. I've recently, like in therapy, I've recently come to learn that trauma is basically how I got to experience things like how I interpreted them as a kid, but not necessarily how they were meant to come off. Like it's not like it was my parents' fault for me to feel some certain type of way when some of these things used to go down. But I remember things like discipline. So let's talk about discipline. Discipline in my father's house was crazy. Discipline in my father's house was crazy. He owned a nyahunyo. I don't know if you know what a nyahunyo is. A nyahunyo. I don't even know if I've said it right because I haven't said the word nyahunyo in such a long time. It's like, I think we can say plastic. Is it plastic? It's like rubber. It's rubber that has been cut into like a cane, and then it's flexible. So like he could be sitting here and then he just, like if he does this, the end, that thing was painful. That thing was painful. I don't remember instances where my dad actually beat me, like akanichapa with the nyahunyo. I don't remember him beating me. I do remember him punishing me once when I failed my exams from, I think I used to be like top 5. And then I came home, I think I was number 23 or something. And I was beaten. I wasn't beaten with the nyahunyo then. I think by then we had already hidden it. Like it became such a menace in that house. Like it was a problem. It's just like, oh my God, we're going to be beaten. But growing up in that house, I saw him use the nyahunyo on people, and like punish them. And so there was an energy of fear. I need to breathe in on that because I can feel it. I can feel the emotion over here. There was an energy of fear in the house. And there was an energy of fear around everywhere. As I'd mentioned, we're living in like some sort of village. So people knew that, my dad is not to be joked around with, I feel like even how people treated us as, like sisters, as neighbors, it was like they were very careful with us. Like there was always some caution, especially when it came to like now like the Nyakoes, if I'm gonna call us that. There was some sort of caution, and that used to be there a lot and with a lot of people, and you could see how people treat you. Like friends would find it weird, like, or difficult to come and visit. I think growing up is when I realized that even my sisters have their own share of, their own story and what they saw or what they experienced and how that made them feel. I think it shocked me. I was just like, y'all also had some, like trauma. Y'all also felt some type of way. And those are some of the things that you just learn, like as times go by. Those are some of the things that you learn. So in terms of punishment, I feel like I grew up with a lot of fear around me and around interacting with people. And there was always consequences for something. Like I remember we would hear our dad is coming, or he's just at the gate. We'd hear that, peep, peep. I remember it, and we would all run to the dining table, open our books, and pretend like we're reading. It was actually a bit crazy. Growing up was actually so much fun, even though I feel like some of the things that, like have made me the way I am as a very like painful things that I took from that growing up. But now that I talk about it, I feel like it was actually fun. But now on the flip side, on this other side, I also feel like growing up with my mom was quite strict. I remember my memories of my mom at an early age. I remember we had a phase where she was very, like I experienced her in so many phases, but I remember she was very strict. And even like we lived in the estate, yes, Sharimoy, we would play as kids. I also still remember a phase where my mom would be getting home and everyone is scattering. I'm just like, okay, we're all scared of her. Like she's high on discipline. And then I think years later, like now that I come to realize it, I realized that she was just stressed. Like she was going through a lot of emotional things. Like she was actually living a very stressful life at that time. And these are conversations that we have had together. I just came to know that, or rather I've just recently realized that I actually grew up in a world of fear, very strict environment. I also remember like living in my dad's house, and I spent so many days, like I didn't want to go to school. I was crying. And I think those were days when I missed my mom. I think it kind of took a toll on me, like from class 3 to class 8. Those are like 5 years. I'm living with my dad. I remember some days I'd call my mom to come and visit me. She'd come over during the weekends. She would bring me, snacks. I remember she even bought me a phone once. Like, I remember when I was in class 6, I had like a kabambe, and then like it was just for me and her to communicate, right? I think it's because of the many instances of me calling her, crying, and be like, I want to see you, come, I remember in those instances of me crying and being very emotional, I have this one memory of like, I'm crying. I don't know what I was crying about, but I remember, you can imagine I'm living in this house where I already feel like a stranger, and we are sharing a room with my sisters. I feel like I've told this to my small sister. I felt like, I felt like there was a double decker bed, and like there's another bed, like there was a double decker bed. I think there were like 3 beds. And since now we're living where we have cousins, so I never had, like a bed of my own. Like, I don't know, this is my bed, like, I don't know if this is my place, There was always that feeling. And I remember there was this one time I was crying, and I went and ran into the bedroom, and I locked the bedroom, and I'm crying. I could hear like voices of like, they're just like, I don't know who was talking, but it was basically just someone being like, oh yeah, analia, wacha tu atamaliza kulia, she's always crying, she'll finish crying. When I think about emotions, I have that core memory in my head where I'm just like, I feel like there was no room for emotions in our home, especially when it comes to like comfort and like hugging. Like, there was just like, things that you come to discover are just like, oh, people hug. I remember even growing up in primary school, I never used to hug people because we had a teacher who had given us like some whole rules: don't hug boys, don't hug anyone, like it was just a lot. So even at home, there's no emotion whatsoever. I feel like when I cried, I would just cry and feel so bad for crying, almost like you're punished for crying. I feel like that has left such a wound on me, especially when it comes to like handling my emotions. And it's something that now I come to realize now that I'm doing therapy. I remember in class 8, now we've lived for 5 years. I'm starting to think about so many things. And I remember now thinking to myself, I don't think I want to live in this house. I feel like I want to go back and live with my mother. I think when I went to live with my mom, I don't know if it was before I decided to go live with my mom or after. I remember I found her diary. I remember like maybe some parts of the diary that I can read. It was just her talking about her experience coming to see me at my dad's house. So I think in class 8 is when now I'm just learning about relationships and how they work. Like in my head, I'm getting the gist of it. So imagine I'm reading my mom's diary and I'm noticing, oh my God, I used to call my mom and cry to her and tell her, come and see me. I used to make her come to her ex's house for a sleepover. Oh my God. Let me just drink tea for that, because I think when I realized that, I became so sad. I was so sad for her. I felt so bad. And I think I felt like, oh my God, I had chosen my dad over my mom, because I feel like those emotions made me feel like that. And that's when I just moved out of my dad's house. Also, I did feel like it wasn't, it wasn't those. It's so weird, when you go and live somewhere. If you're someone who's gone to live with a relative, I think you can testify that it's so weird. Because I remember leaving that house, and it was just a weird feeling. It was just like I spent 5 years in this house, and now I'm leaving, and it just doesn't feel like a loss. It just doesn't feel like I've been. I also feel like maybe my sisters are going through their own emotions, because I remember not feeling welcomed. I just remember leaving that house, and I was just like, I'm never coming back here. I was just like, I'm never coming back here. Okay, fast forward, I've been to the house several times, but I remember that feeling as a kid. It was just like those stories you read in the Bible when someone leaves their home to go. It actually felt like that. And yeah, I remember just going back to my mom's house, and I believe that's when now it's after class 8. I'm about to join like high school, and then now just so many things were happening afterwards. And yeah, that's basically my childhood. And I think both situations, like living in Shaurimoyo with my mother and living in Githurai 45 Mohoko with my dad and my stepmom and my sisters, and everyone else was involved, like my cousins and everything. It was such a life-changing experience, because these are things that right now I think about and I'm just like, oh my God, that's why I am like this, because that and that happened at that particular time, you know? I found myself sharing this story with so many of my friends over the past few years. And at some point, it started becoming boring to me. I'm just like, how many people are going to tell you have childhood trauma, that you felt like you were treated some type of way and you didn't like it? And I think I made myself, like I shamed myself into silence, where I was just like, everyone has childhood trauma. You know, you meet people and then they tell you, Ama, you listen to people's story, and you're just like, oh, that's actually really, really sad. Maybe I should stop focusing on myself and, you know, like just let people, you know, like experience their life and not dwell on the sad things. But I think recently I started doing therapy. I'm now realizing at 27 years old that like whatever happened has really has made me be the way I am right now. Like there's so many emotions of like every time I am sad, I get so sad. Like I get so sad. Like I get unbelievably sad. Like I'm just like, why am I so sad? Why can I not like just experience sadness to a normal level? Like why do I have to cry? Why do I have to go to the extent of, you know, thoughts of like suicide? I have never tried committing suicide, but I have romanticized it for the longest time. And I used to wonder, like, I don't think I could kill like I'm just like, I don't think I could kill myself. Like I don't think I have the guts to like do something and like take away my life. But why do I feel like I'm so hopeless in so many situations, you know? Now that I am listening to podcasts on like childhood trauma and hearing that your caregiver was responsible with how, you know, your emotions should have been handled. And I think talking about some things like this, like growing up and feeling so different and being in places where I just felt like, I remember being at my mom's, I felt like this is not enough, like there's something else, you know. And then I go to my dad's, and then at that place I'm just like, oh, these people, I don't think who can equate to, you know. I'm just like, I'm a stranger in this land. And I feel like for the longest time, even till date, I find it so hard to feel almost like at home in so many spaces. And even in this house that I live here in, I have lived in this house for like 2 years, but I remember the first year, it took me so much time before I could notice and like look around and be like, oh, I belong here. These are my things. This is my house. This is my home. I feel safe here. You know, I can tell, you know, like even from, I feel like you can hear it from my voice, something about like just, you know, like, the lack of assurance, the lack of comfort is making me like a bit teary right now. But I just wanted to share that with you. I just wanted to share that, you know, like some of these things that you might be like going through right now are things that you can actually investigate, like be curious about, because I feel like that's how I live my life. I'm very curious about why things happen the way they happen, and I feel deeply, and I just wanted to take you guys with me on this journey of unpacking. So thank you so much for your time. If you have watched till this minute, I hope you enjoyed. I would really love if we shared our experiences in the comment section, and like, share, and subscribe. Thank you so much. Till next episode. Bye bye.